So when you started off, now I remember you were writing for like the New York Post, you were writing for a bunch of these different outlets, and I think they liked you because you're a person of color, but you were talking
Yep.
against the narrative of racism is the end all be, we were all held back because of racism, right? That was the narrative for a while there. And you were saying that's not true. I don't agree with any of this. So you were kind of brought into the fold, I would say, of probably a lot of right wing journalistic
Yeah. Yeah.
outlets.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
how did that start? Like, what were you talking about, and what were they
Yeah.
like? Who were you writing for before COVID hit?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you and I were not talking back then. Were you at the Hill at that time, or was that after? Is this 2020?
No, I wasn't. I didn't join the Hill until, well, 2020. I was with the Hill until 2021, or no, 20. No, I was there with 2021 to 2022. So 1 year.
Uh
So
huh.
you were on the right talking about racism and how that's just all a bunch of, which I agreed with you during that time too. I was one of those people that was like, no, not no. I don't think racism is
Right.
like, I don't walk outside as an Asian woman and think, "Oh, I'm going to be this is like the thing
Yeah.
I think about when I go outside my house."
Right. Stop Asian. Stop Asian hate.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not the top thought in my brain when I go
Right.
out in the
Right.
world. So tell us kind of where you were before the pandemic
Yeah.
hit, what group kind of embraced you, what you were talking about, and then we'll get into your experience with COVID because I think you were also ostracized.
Yeah. 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 So George Floyd happened, which I don't know if I'm ready to talk about all of it now. There's been more and more information coming out on that particular story, but I want to dig
Right.
into more and more. Coleman Hughes has a great piece in the Free Press I got to read, and there's a new documentary. Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter, the black guys on Substack, the contrarian black guys, as they say, they've been talking about it, and I'm becoming starting to become more and more convinced now, actually, that even that case was not exactly what we thought it was at the time, even by myself, because the kind of default approach by a lot of centrists and sensible minded people was that this is an aberration, this is completely wrong and unjustified, and maybe it is racism, but this is obvious, indisputable evidence of police brutality. But the criminal justice system, for all of its flaws, there's not clear evidence, particularly for police shootings, being driven by racial animus towards Black Americans. Like when you look at the data, you see so many white Americans shot by the police that never make it in the news, like people like Tony Timpa, Daniel Shaver, many other individuals who were brutalized by police officers, but it just never made the news. So you end up having people my age and obviously people your age and across the spectrum who hear, oh, black guy shot by the police, and it's like Black Lives Matters everywhere and diversity training and white privilege, all this stuff, and it's like that's how this indoctrination happens. Is like one thing after another. It gets woven into the cultural psyche. It becomes like a religious thing for many people. There's Black Lives Matter marches happening, and it's like the echo chamber is systemic racism is everywhere. The police are out there hunting down black men, trying to kill them. That's what LeBron James said. So you have a lot of fear and anxiety around this issue, a lot of paranoia, a lot of cultural paranoia, and kind of collective psychosis on this kind of view of criminal justice and race in the country. And then you see all these other people um, over time. You see not it's not just black people are oppressed, but then it's like all these other people. It's like, hey, like you were pretty sure like your dad was like a software engineer and like your mom was a lawyer, and you guys came from Pakistan, but like your parents are making six figures, and like you're buying into this and saying like, yeah, white people, like this is part of the white patriarchy, and I'm a victim of racism. It's like pretty sure you're living a pretty privileged life. So I was kind of going against that, not in the sense of racism doesn't exist or never existed, because this one piece I think you're alluding to, that was kind of my breakout piece in the New York Post, The Fallacies of White Privilege. That was all about how I had experienced a lot of racism growing up in a white majority school, and that was kind of a traumatic part of childhood,
Hmm.
and was very difficult. But over time, we've made a lot of progress, and for some reason on the left, there's just an inability to recognize the tremendous progress, and kind of understand it's actually the reverse now. Like if you're in corporate America or at elite universities, if you're black, and or Hispanic and or gay or trans or whatever, and you're qualified, you have all the credentials, you're given a leg up, right? People
Hmm.
desperately want more qualified Black people and gay people. Like they want, and some of that is arguably just kind of the cynical progressivism of like we want to look like we're all about diversity and we care about people, yet we're cutting corners here and here, and we're not actually
Right.
functioning like an ethical organization. So that there's that as well. So I was pointing that out at that time, I think, in a very poignant and genuine way, which really struck a chord among many people, from like Sam Harris to Ben Shapiro, many people reading my stuff and supporting what I was doing, and I was excited about it. And from there, I just kept on writing more and more, particularly about police shootings and Black Lives Matter, and I guess starting to see for the first time how,
Like breaking down the data and
yeah,
say this is the truth of it. Because yeah, when you look at the
yeah,
actual shooting data, a lot of the data just doesn't go with the narrative. The narrative is there; they're pushing a certain narrative, but when you actually start digging in, and this is kind of time and time again, almost for every topic, right? The minute you start digging into the actual data, it's like, well, but the data isn't really supporting this particular narrative, right? So so you were so I just want to kind of back up for just a second because you are living in Canada. You're a Canadian, and you live in a
Mhm.
liberal city, right? Did you grow up there in Vancouver? Are you from there? Are you
uh,
from somewhere else?
yeah. Actually, I'm a couple hours away from Vancouver. I just say Vancouver because that's what
It's
people
easy.
know. But I live in
Okay.
a small town called Chilliwack that no one's ever heard of, including half of Canada.
S-
It's actually a very conservative town. Actually, a lot of
Okay.
Dutch immigrants, a lot of evangelical Christians. A lot of my great friends happen to be more on that side of things religiously. But it's interesting though, because still, like, even in a very conservative city, and maybe this has definitely changed. I would say radically the last 4 or 5 years. But even here in a conservative town, like the local school district is absolutely captured by this crazy woke ideology in ways that I can't. Some things I can't even share. But like former teachers that I had who were like very centrist and like showing both sides of the perspective on say Black Lives Matter or like gay marriage, abortion. Like one of my teachers who was doing that, showing both sides and really giving a fair shake to the conservative and liberal perspectives. Now suddenly being forced to have trigger warnings or have a counselor in the room to deal with students, and up until the point of like he can't even teach there anymore, and he was laid off because of student complaints that he was defending Trump just because he was doing pros and cons about Trump
Oh
and like
gosh.
a bunch of stuff. So it's like, yeah, you live in even in very conservative places. It's for some reason you get into education, elementary, middle, high school. Like my sister was telling me the other day, first day back from winter break, and the big thing everyone's talking about is how the boys' bathrooms now have tampons, and like everyone's talking about it, and people are leaving to go. All the boys are going
Oh
to the
my
bathroom now, and
gosh.
I mean, honestly, sounds like a great
Yeah.
time, having fun and just figuring out what's
Yeah.
going on. But it's like that level of insanity is just like really, it's not just like an issue that I'm writing about in terms of it's not just the United States, it's not just New York or Portland, Oregon, or Seattle or LA. It's everywhere, really.
Right. Right.
It's really hard to exaggerate the problem.
So you were writing all of these things and being embraced by like the Ben Shapiros of the world. COVID hits and you're writing and you're in all of these different and you're young and you're doing all of this. I mean, you're doing quite well at that age. And at that point, what were you like 20, 19, 20 years old when you were writing about racism?
Yeah, 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 19. Yeah, 19 first op-ed. Yeah, that was so weird how that happened. Yeah, it was because of that piece that this career kind of got rocket launched. It was never like journalism was never even like a thought like grade 10, 11, 12, and even after 2 years after high school or 1 year after, it was never even a thought. But it just kind of some sort of weird spiritual thing, which
What did you want to be?
getting more. Well, I really wanted to go to Harvard or Columbia or an elite Ivy League university. That was one of my big dreams in high school, but I didn't have the grades for it, and I just kind of fell apart after high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I had some ideas like maybe like film and acting, potentially stand up comedy, things that I still want to do, by the way. So if you see me winning the Oscars in a few years, that's first edit on the Kim Iverson show.
Yeah.
No, like I'm very much more on the sort of high creativity kind of artsy side of things.
Okay.
Always used to get the awards for like top artist. So at a certain point, I was like the best painter and drawer, sketch artist. And then in middle school, I was like the big theater kid. So I was always, the one cracking the jokes and just saying outrageous things and like performing in front of people. Like that was a big thing. So I was really kind of all over the place. Like I was really good at math, but really bad at science. Really bad at biology, but at a certain point, better at physics. Like there's all these, like I was kind of all over the place, and that's
Hmm.
kind of how the creative mind works. The high ADD mind, it's like you have all these sprawling different interests, and for a while there was a lot of anxiety, actually, a lot of anxiety that I had early on, and some of this is just immigrant parenting of like figure your shit out right now. Like, what's your 5 year plan? What are you going to do? Which college? What
Right.
discipline? And I'm like, I kind of like a lot of different things, and I don't know, if I'm going to fit a particular box. And I remember being so worried at a certain point, like grade 7, grade 8, and then grade 12. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know where I fit in. Like, I feel like I'm going to be one of those losers who just never got anywhere after high school because all my friends had, more of a established thing. Like, okay, we're going to go study the sciences. A lot of my
Right.
friends, doctors, lawyers, engineers, my closest friends were in those areas. But I guess just with Black Lives Matter, identity politics, and just something cosmic happened there, which maybe I'll one day be able to articulate better. And for those of you who don't know, I'm studying mysticism, Eastern spirituality, meditative, contemplative traditions in my university program. Just as like it's not really a program. I'm just kind of working one on one with a couple of very good professors. So that's like the other world that I operate in. Is I'm reading like ancient Hindu and Buddhist scriptures and
Hmm.
figuring out what kind of experiences they were having and what self transcendence and dissolving the ego means. Like those are my other interests. Anyway,
So then COVID hits, and you try to publish some. So then you're also still you're doing what you always did, which is diving into the data, and you're looking at the data, and you're like, this isn't. Things are not as they're saying. Things are not as they seem. And you start trying to write pieces about COVID and what happened at that point. This is where things kind of go awry.
yeah,
Even with right wing outlets, this is what is really interesting about this because people think, oh, the right wing, they're all about free speech. They're all about learning the truth and eyes opening. But you were in the right. You were like on the right side of, journalism with right wing outlets, and they still censored you. They still would not publish you.
yeah, and I've abstained from naming people or naming the places
Name
because that
names.
would
Come
just
on, drop names.
oh,
Let's do it. Let's get them.
New York Times, Washington
Oh,
Post.
those aren't right wing
Yeah,
outlets. That's to be expected.
yeah. Yeah, no, I was writing for a few different places, and I mean, Globe and Mail, all the way from left wing like Globe and Mail, the Grammys, to more right wing places as well. And basically, in a nutshell, the response I was getting, not just from one editor or from one publication, but many different publications, some of which were even more, I wouldn't even say right wing, but like alternative, sort of in the contrarian space. And the response was like, no, like like, yeah, we're against wokeism, we're against radical transgender ideology, but this is the science. COVID vaccines are safe and effective. The risks are lower than the benefits. It makes sense for virtually everyone, and we don't want to promote any vaccine hesitancy or any conspiracy theory on our
Mm.
platform. Right? We're just because we're conservative doesn't mean we're going to entertain every conspiracy theory. Right? We're not going to go full Alex Jones. That's kind of the response I was getting. And for me, it was like just such a shock because some of these places I had openly written about many controversial topics like Black Lives Matter, identity politics, the transgender issue a little bit, um, just a bit of the gender wage gap stuff. Um, but this was like a third rail. I mean, I thought Black Lives Matter was a third rail, right? Because I mean, it depends where you go. In certain areas, that is a third rail, but it proved to be actually not as bad as COVID. COVID proved to be a far more dangerous topic, which kind of surprised me, given the fact that historically the left was anti big pharma and more skeptical of authority decrees and these kind of public government efforts at propaganda and
Yeah.
convincing people based on scant evidence about various measures, like all this like level of corruption. But I was not able to publish even stories of vaccine injuries that I was hearing about locally. And I think that's what really red pilled me on COVID